Hello, my lovely soul family. Welcome back to another episode of Soul Over Matter podcast, a podcast for souls on the awakening journey. Today, we have a very special guest, my dear soul sister, Mariya Nurislamova. She is a spiritual teacher, she is an author, she is a channeler, and she is also a podcast host herself, and she'll chat about that. So I am excited to have her here and just chat and flow. So Mariya, welcome to Soul Over Matter. How are you?
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me. It's so lovely to see you on this lovely sunny day. And yeah, it's an honor to be here.
I'm so happy you're here. I'm so excited for what's going to flow through us today, what's alive for us today. So, what feels alive for you in this now moment?
Probably the energy of sisterhood. I think that me reconnecting with you, it definitely felt like a homecoming some in certain ways. And I do feel that finding other sisters brings us closer to unity, and every meeting is very much a synchronicity. It is very much meant to be, and almost enables us to call back certain parts of our soul so that we can be more complete within ourselves, but also as humans coming together. So yeah.
I have chills as you speak. That feels alive for me too. Yes, that homecoming, that I also call it like the rewilding of the woman, right? Of the feminine in our world, in our society. What does that feel like to you, right? Someone maybe listening is like, homecoming, what do you mean by
Well, I since my awakening in 2018, I've been feeling perhaps maybe less at home on planet Earth than I felt prior to my awakening, right? So it is the remembrance of life on other planets. It's the remembrance of being out of body, and that full fusion with my higher self and spirit in the spirit realm. And so the energies of planet Earth are quite dense. It is one of the denser planets that I personally incarnate on. And so for me, anytime I meet somebody who has a very high vibrational spirit, who's able to hold a certain level of purity, within their auric field, so they can help and heal others, for me, it feels like a homecoming. And what I mean by that is these vibrations feel a lot closer to the out of body experience, and how, being, in a discarnate state feels like, knowing all of the truth, being part of everything. But for me, I guess that's what I mean by saying homecoming.
Beautiful. Can you share about your awakening, about waking up to yourself, to your soul in this lifetime, your
Yeah,
journey?
totally. It happened out of nowhere. I don't think I could have planned it if I tried. I think I've always felt very connected and spiritual. Like I've always believed that there was a force bigger than myself, call it God. But I never really felt like I had any special abilities or any proof that, the world beyond the veil exists. And so my awakening started in 2018 randomly, with my clairaudience opening up. So that was like the first thing that happened. I started being guided by a voice in my head that felt distinctly separate from my own voice. It was a male voice. And at first, that male voice was giving me very simple advice around, certain meditations that I could be doing, certain practices. But he was also extremely wise and could advise me on what was to happen, what was to come, and somehow also had messages from my family members. And that was the beginning. And then we started having conversations, and he spoke about my spirit family and just introduced me to a lot of my gifts as well. And so essentially, since then, it was part it was a journey of understanding and discovering who I was at soul level. So that really is what awakening is for me. And I feel like different parts of me are coming back almost on a daily, if not a weekly basis still. And since then, I had other things open up like clairvoyance, clairsentience, claircognizance, all of them. Apart from, I don't think I have, the clear smell yet. But outside of that, I feel like I have all of them. But it's been a beautiful journey, and it's interesting. I went from being quote unquote an average and normal human to still being an average and normal human. Only now I have access to the Akashic records and the field of knowing. So it's hard for me sometimes to just focus on the physicality of objects and people and circumstances because I see so many more layers to them. And it's been quite a fascinating journey. But again, if I were to plan the awakening, I could not have planned it. This just happened. It was time.
It was time. I feel you. Yes. It's like the universe nudging us, like, okay, you've been asleep long enough in this lifetime. Now it's time to wake up for yourself and also for others, right? And I don't think I've really chatted about the clairs too much on my podcast yet. Can you just give a brief of like what clairaudience is, what claircognizance is,
Mhm.
and yeah, the ones that you know of
Yes, of course.
anyway, like the simple, I think there are 5 simple ones.
Yeah. Yeah, there are 5 simple ones. And I can tell you also kind of like how it feels for me. So the first one, clear audience, is like the clear hearing. The clear hearing is really getting messages from spirit and the unseen realm. And it can be various, levels of the unseen realm. It could be even beings that live and are currently existing and incarnated on planet Earth, such as elementals, for instance, fairies, elves, what have you. Or it could be beings of higher caliber, such as spirit guides or, totem animals or spirit animals. One of the first ones also that I started hearing was my personal dragon. Every soul has their personal dragon. So mine is like the original white dragon. And, his voice was also very, very strong. But essentially, it's being able to hear spirit realm and getting messages that are literally as if the voice is talking to you. And you can literally just like write it down. The messages are very clear: do this, don't do that. Or sometimes it's, some deep understanding or knowledge about like a particular subject. Like you may ask them, can you please tell me about the heart chakra? And they'll tell you about the heart chakra. It is quite interesting. And then clairaudience, for me at least, gets stronger at night. It's kind of interesting because at night, and that's how I like, sometimes they wake me up at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning. And I would get a stream, like a download. And that like, sometimes I need to grab like my phone and write it down because I'm like, oh my God, I'm totally going to forget this. But I gather that like, essentially there's like a highway that goes between our realm and the realm of spirit. Like if it's high vibrational spirit. And I think when everybody is awake, because human beings are generated so many thought frequencies in the mental, that highway is very busy. And so it's very hard for higher dimensional frequencies and spirits to go through and come through. At night, it's really quiet. People are generating very limited amount of thoughts. And so I hear these voices like 3 times louder than I would in the daytime. So nighttime's perfect time for clairaudience as well. Or even sometimes in the dreams, sometimes like in the dreams, if you're dreaming and you just hear a voice come through, but you don't see who it's coming through from, you don't see the source of the voice, but you just hear it and it's very clear and and generally when you wake up, you remember what the voice said. That is a form of clairaudience right there. Clairvoyance is clear seeing. And how does it's essentially your third eye being open is all that is, right? So there are many different forms of clairvoyance. It could be in my case, it's seeing energy, a certain renditions of energies. Like I don't see people's auric field, but for instance, if I'm doing a healing on someone, I'm able to see what part of their body and which of their light bodies is hurting at the moment in time, and I can see exactly why, like literally in my third eye. Or for instance, if I'm looking at a karmic relationship of 2 people, my third eye is going to show me a movie of maybe a past life that these two people lived, and it's literally like a movie. When you have both clairaudience and clairvoyance, it's a movie that has a sound, so that's nice. If you only have clairvoyance, it's a movie that doesn't have a sound, and you're like, okay, well, I'm not sure what's happening, but I'm seeing something. And then there's claircognizance, is the clear knowing of something. And it's essentially when you just, and that happens to me when I connect to my higher self. Essentially, my entire podcast is done through a state of hypnosis where I connect with my higher self. And it's almost like as if you were submerged in the soup of information, right? And as you're floating in the soup of information, you just know certain things. But sometimes it's almost like you can tell the story, but you don't know the end of the story until you tell the story, if that makes sense. It's just that knowing that on some level it benefits you, but it doesn't benefit you because you don't always know what the punchline is until you speak it into reality. And then clairsentience is clear feeling. And that is, I think, partially being an empath is like a form of that, right? It's essentially, no, people cannot fake it in front of you anymore. Like if they hate you or if they're going through something, you're going to know it because it's through the feeling, right? It's having a very open heart space, a very open heart chakra, and very open light bodies that are essentially receptacles, right? And so anytime you're coming in contact with one being or multiple beings, or like you would walk into a room and you would just get through a feeling, like you essentially know what everybody else is energetically and emotionally at that point in time. And this is actually a very nice tool, again, for healing, because you would know who is open to receiving right now, who is not, what kind of things are open to receiving, whether trauma might be, because essentially at that point in time, you're feeling exactly what they're feeling. And so they cannot fool you. Very often with trauma, I find whether that's physical trauma or emotional trauma, people have lived with that trauma for such a long time that it feels like a part of their body. But as a healer, when you step into their space, you see those disharmonies. You feel these disharmonies in your body. And so that is clairsentience for me. And then there are people also that have I'm not sure, I don't remember the exact terminology for the clear sense of smell. But sometimes, people would, I don't know, walk into a room and feel like it smells funny to them. And it might just be like, I don't know, maybe they're smelling like a demonic presence or something, not to be morbid, or quite the contrary. Maybe like sometimes they're smelling angels. And I heard like angels actually smell like very sweet, like vanilla, or sometimes like flowers. I don't have that. I've maybe had like very minor hints of that, maybe twice in my life. So I'm not an expert on that one. I don't know if you've experienced anything similar.
I actually do have it. It's
Oh my God.
the one with smell. I forgot what it's called. I've had it all my life and I didn't know what it was when I was younger. And it's interesting because yes, I can pick up on smells of entities, right? Entities that maybe don't have great agendas. And then yeah, the smell of my grandmother's spirit, for instance, or just I even feel like spirit guides. I'm like, I've never met you in this life, but I can smell you and you feel good. You smell good. So yeah, it's very fascinating. And I think the clairs are such a beautiful gateway for people to trust their intuition, right? To trust their channel, because we all receive information and messages differently, right? We can all have the same meditation and receive it and have different messages come through pictures or sense or feeling differently. So I love how you describe that, all the different clairs. I would say, how would you feel people can heighten these clairs or tap into the one that is most alive for them? Because for me, growing up, I would say clairsentient and cognizant were huge for me, but now my other clairs are coming online more. So yeah, how would you help someone determine their most prominent one?
Yeah, totally. I will tell you that the easiest one, albeit nothing is easy, right? Probably the easiest one for most people to open up would be clairvoyance. Because I believe that that is a natural byproduct of working with your chakral system and decalcifying your pineal gland. So I believe that, yeah, like for like at least 60% of humanity, that is very much a possibility, which is like a pretty large number. Um, there are many meditations and practices. Essentially, for you to open up your third eye, you need to accumulate enough energies in your lower chakras so that the energy can go up, right? So for a lot of people, where they're going to stumble, the first stumbling block is going to be opening up the heart. This is the next, like the next big lesson for humanity is opening the heart space. We have been here for 2,000 years since Jesus came. So it's been a little bit, it's taken us a while, let me tell you. Now, there's a lot of heart trauma, unfortunately, in the human collective. So step one, before you can access your third eye or throat chakra for that matter, I think heart healing is really where a lot of people are going to need to start. The good news is once the bridge, and I call the anahata, the heart chakra, the bridge, because it legitimately is the bridge between your lower chakras and your higher chakras. Once the floodgate is open, your energy is going to go up. There is and then it's just a matter of time. So really, the moment you unlock the heart space, the moment you understand and realize that there is more to life than just reliving the trauma. There is more to life than pain and suffering, right? There's a full breadth of emotion, but it doesn't mean that awakening is purple rainbows and unicorns. In fact, it's all of it. And it's the blood and sweat and tears and the ugly crying and the purging and all of that. Once you accept that, then your energy is going to go up. Now, I find that first you're going to have to plant the seed. For those people for whom clairvoyance is not opened up, I would plant the seed in your third eye area. So the third eye, or the brow chakra, as it's being called, is located kind of like in the center of your skull. For those folks that don't know, in between your eyes, and kind of like a little bit, like maybe like 1 inch above your brows. And that's why you would need to plant a seed, right? Like you literally just plant a seed of clairvoyance. Imagine there's a fertile soil, and then you allow that seed to grow into a lotus flower. So then the lotus flower kind of like opens up, right? And you want to imagine that lotus flower being purple. And then essentially you would need to do activations for your third eye. I'm of the opinion that the third eye chakra is violet. Because I call the crown chakra white. For me, that color white is the epitome of the human existence. So when I do the activations on third eye chakra space, I imagine there's a pulsating sphere of violet light. And then I do two things. I start rotating that sphere counterclockwise because it really helps you remove all the impurities. A lot of people, like when their pineal gland is calcified, they really have to deal with a lot of dirt, debris, and all of the stuff that just it's kind of like if you've never used a room in a house, that room is going to be really dirty. So you have to do the spring cleaning before that room can be pretty and usable again. And so that's a little bit of the situation with the third eye. And then once you rotate it counterclockwise and remove all of that stuff that's not supposed to be there, then you can shift the vibrations and you start turning it. You can start turning it clockwise, in a clockwise direction. And then you would imagine it as a pulsating sphere of violet light. And there are ways to amplify that as well. One way to amplify your third eye is actually through connecting to the North Star. North Star, it's a pretty familiar concept, I think, to most people, right? It is, the star that currently is the North Star is called Polaris. It is a fairly bright star. So what you would want to imagine is that literally in your mind's eye, you would want to imagine that Polaris is right in front of you. The North Star is right in front of you. And you would want to send like an impulse from your third eye to the North Star with your breath. Essentially on the out breath, you would send it to Polaris. Polaris, the North Star would amplify it and send it back to you. And then essentially you'd keep doing that loop. And every time the energy of the North Star comes back to your third eye, that energy is essentially, that impulse is 10 times bigger than what you originally sent. And so essentially you start accumulating the light of the star in your third eye. And the light of the North Star is actually really good for the lotus flower that just unfolded in your third eye. And so over time, with like a practice like this, you would notice that you're starting to get intuitive hits. But the way those intuitive hits come is through images and pictures in your brain, in your head. And so make no mistake, that already is clairvoyance. So like clairvoyance doesn't always start like with seeing whole movies in front of you, inside of your head. Sometimes it's like you really have to start small and take like the little morsels that you're getting for what it is. And so that was like my very long-winded answer to how to open clairvoyance. I think that one I think is the simplest one. The second one that I think the second simpler one is clairsentience. For all of us empaths out there, actually ironically think that the people that are meant to open this sense almost can't help it. It's going to happen with them. In fact, I think most of us who have this one open wish we didn't because you just feel all of it, and all of it can be very, very overwhelming, and sometimes you have to have boundaries. But I do believe that one of the prerequisites, again, to opening this center is opening up the heart, because the heart is this beautiful tool of not just expressing what you feel, but most importantly, like receiving and perceiving what the others around you feel. And that comes with building bridges. I connect to the human collective quite often, and I'm able to look at the energetic structure of, your average human, your average man or woman on planet Earth. I will tell you that in healthy heart chakras, on other planets, what I'm seeing, what I'm essentially that green center, it looks like a little bit of a sun. And what I mean by that, it has this rays emanating from it. And every ray is a bridge that you build to another human or another being. It doesn't have to be a human. It could be a guide. It could be an animal. It could be like like a natural feature. That is what like a healthy heart space looks like. I will tell you that a lot of human beings have not enough bridges. Like 3 to 5 is an average number of bridges, which makes no sense, because how many people do you come in contact with over the course of your life to only have 3 to 5 good bridges, 3 to 5 healthy relationships or meaningful relationships? So I find that, the way towards becoming clairsentient is through building more bridges, more meaningful relationships with people, opening up your heart, opening up yourself. And it goes so much above and beyond small talk. And it's also, that permission to be vulnerable, because there's no other way to build meaningful relationships other than, to be vulnerable first. So that's kind of like what, how I would open it up. I think clairaudience and claircognizance are harder to open up. I think only about 15% of humanity could open clairaudience, and I think only about 8 claircognizance. So I don't know that we should go there, but if you want to, I'm happy to. You tell me.
That's so fascinating. I actually didn't think clairvoyance would be the easiest. That's so interesting. I really love how you shared about opening the heart chakra, right? How, because a lot of our life here on this dense planet Earth, as beautiful as she is, we love her so much and we love being here. It is dense, right? How would you, and we're taught to close off our hearts, right? We're taught to not trust and to not be vulnerable, men and women, right? The wounds run so deep in our society of connection, of community. How would you say, what are some simple steps that you can share for the collective of opening their heart? Is it visualization? Is it reaching out to people? What are some simple ways people can begin tapping more into their heart chakra?
Yeah. Well, we spoke a lot about you teaching self-love. So that's step one, right? So it is really hard to love another before you love yourself, right? Love is also taking others as a part of who you are. But if you cannot even take yourself as a part of yourself, right, without judgment, then it's really hard to do that for others. So I would say, like, if we're talking healthy practices, is quieting down your internal critic, building up, another entity within you that I call maybe your best cheerleader, that one person or being inside of you, one part of you that's always going to keep track of all the good things about you and remind you about that. And even having like a self-gratitude journal where you record all like the little wins or the things that you're proud of yourself for, the things that you love about yourself, or maybe other people appreciate about you. So that is something like in terms of habits, right? Now, there are many meditations of opening up the heart space. Unfortunately, I think that I would maybe start with the meditations and the energy work before reaching out to other people. The problem with reaching out to other people, although it seems like maybe it is a logical solution, is this: just because you have a relationship with someone does not mean that it is an authentic relationship. It doesn't mean that you've kind of gone all the way, right? Because a lot of people have fake relationships where you really don't expect the other person to have your best interest in mind or to know you enough to even understand where your best interest is, right? So most people, for that matter, don't even know themselves, right? Let alone can tell another being who they are at soul level. So I like, for the opening of the heart space, I like working with the Divine Mother. Divine Mother is a female source, female face of Source. So Source, how I use it, or like how I think about it, is the entity where everything came from, right? So it's essentially the same thing as God, Goddess, Absolute. It has many names. Now it has two aspects, essentially. The first polarity that was created in the universe was the polarity of masculine and feminine. And so the Divine Mother is that feminine polarity. She is an incredible energy in helping humans, or for anyone really, to open up their heart. And one of my favorite meditations for opening the heart space is this one. I'm just going to kind of like tell you really quickly what I do. So I imagine that there is an ocean of emerald light, and that ocean belongs to the Divine Mother. And so I imagine floating on top of the ocean, essentially with like my arms outstretched and my feet outstretched, like in this pose of surrender. And then I imagine that my heart's space is starting to expand, and it's this beautiful emerald light, emerald glow that's starting to kind of like take over my whole body. And so I'm starting to vibrate at the same frequency that this beautiful ocean of love, right? Love, acceptance, compassion, beauty, understanding, and self-acceptance, not just love for others, self-love as well. And then, I tend to do the clearing or the healing for my heart. So I almost imagine that my body dissolves in the ocean, and the only thing that's left is my heart, kind of like floating above the waters. And then I invite the Divine Mother to work with me on my heart space. And generally, when she does the cleaning, she wills my heart to fall, to divide itself to the cellular level. So essentially, my heart just turns into a trillion cells that are floating above the top of the ocean. And as that happens, what is possible is for the ocean to do the really, really deep cleanse of every single cell of your heart space. And the interesting part about the heart space is our hearts are magnetic. So our heart space is the center of magnetism of our body. Because of that, it tends to accumulate all kinds of things like dust and particles and blockages as a magnet, because it attracts both the great things and the not so great things. And it also holds on to things like a great magnet would, right? And so it's actually very important to do these types of practices to remove anything, any toxic energy, anything that's not supposed to be in your heart, because the job of your heart is to be a magnet, right? You have to give your heart the space to not have to be a magnet for a few moments, and just to surrender to the love of the Divine Mother. And so when that great cleanse happens, every cell just kind of like gets regenerated, started at the membrane level, and then everything that's inside of the cell, it starts glowing. And it starts glowing with this beautiful emerald light. And then I ask the Divine Mother to assemble my heart back in the way that she would assemble it, in the perfect, almost like blueprint of how my heart is supposed to be. And then she assembles it in a way that feels right for her, and that is in my greatest good and the greatest good of humanity as well. And every time it's a new shape, because we cannot walk into the same river twice, right? Like the next lap of our journey, the next part of our journey is not what the last part of our journey was. And so that is going to require maybe a different level of the openness of the heart. So I like, meditations like this one. And again, like developing actually a really good relationship with the Divine Mother, as in introducing yourself, asking about her is like the first step to opening your heart to love. So next time when you meet people, you can have that vulnerable, authentic relationship with them and go all the way, instead of feeling like you have to, put like a brave face on or put a mask on in order to conform to what society wants you to be instead of being who you are. So that's kind of like what I would do.
I was right there.
Yes, you
I
totally
was right
were.
there. I was in that emerald light. Like it felt even just a clearing, just you speaking it. And yeah, that connection with our heart, right? This portal of energy. And with the collective right now, I mean, the collective is going through that dark night of the soul, right? I mean, our earth as a being is going through this awakening. So I think visualizations are really beautiful for those on this journey, no matter where we are, right? No matter what lessons we're learning, it's all here, and it's all for our greatest good, right? And the greatest good of all. And to I love what you said too, to introduce yourself to the Divine Mother, to introduce yourself to guides, to power animals, spirit animals, because we aren't here to be alone, right? Can you talk about that, about this illusion of separation that permeates through our collective consciousness, that is really coming to the surface right now? And yeah, just this energy of we're alone in life.
Totally, totally. Yeah, well, third dimensional worlds tend to be the worlds where loneliness is one of the playbooks. It is one of the dominating emotions and states. Now, of course, it is a great illusion from the perspective of source consciousness, because everything that has ever been created came from the same source and will go back to that same source once this cycle is over and done with. And so I find it, maybe I'll walk you through another. It's not even a theory of mine, but it's a deep knowing of mine as well, which is essentially us as humans, right? Despite having all 7 chakras, we have one dominating one, and that one dominating one is almost like the chakra that where the either the bulk of our energy goes, or it just gets a disproportionate amount of our energy. And that dominating chakra is different for different people. But most people have their dominating chakra. Most people on planet Earth today, is what I meant to say. Their dominating chakra is between the root and the solar plexus, so one of the lower 3 chakras. It just happens to be the case. The problem with having most of your energy go through these chakras or collecting these chakras is these are the chakras of loneliness. And what I mean by that is, in the same way that, so like one of the greatest principles of the universe is as above, so below. So essentially, if you understand your body, you understand the universe. And the opposite works as well. Like if you understand the universe, you understand your own body, which means that whatever imperfections you see in your own body are the imperfections that exist in the universe, and vice versa. But essentially, the lower chakras, they don't represent unity. So in the same way as you're going from the root chakra to the crown chakra of your body, your crown chakra is where unity lives in your body, and your root chakra is where separation lives in your body, right? And so essentially, if you're living as a human being, if your reality is a state of separateness, right? By definition, your world is going to be defined by certain core beliefs. And one of the core beliefs of lower chakras is, I'm on my own. And not only that, but that belief has proof in your childhood and in your adolescent years. Every single human that that is currently incarnated on planet Earth has instances of I'm on my own. They can think back to their past and think of at least a few examples of where they had to fend for themselves. And it could be for many, many reasons. Like when you're born as a kid, At first, you think that your parents are always going to be there. But what about that first moment that you were hurting and your parents were just not around? Maybe you went to school or something and like somebody hit you, I don't know, with their backpack, accidentally or not, and then your parent wasn't there. All of a sudden you're on your own, right? So living in lower dimensional worlds is actually trial by loneliness. And by the way, it is also a great lesson, right? Because how do we discover who we are at soul level is by going through a journey of understanding that loneliness is a fallacy and loneliness is an illusion. And the only way you go there, and I hate to sound like a broken record, is through opening the bridge to your heart, your heart and to the higher chakras. Because the moment you start vibrating at the center, at the center that is your anahata, your heart space, you're all of a sudden discovering that you are part of nature. That is what happens in the heart space. When you're part of nature and nature is a part of you, you realize that it's impossible for you to be alone, because every single tree, every single bird, every single river, every single mountain is you and you are them. And so they exist, like it's essentially they're in this together with you. So loneliness is impossible, right? And then you go to higher chakras even more and you realize that, whoa, there is spirit realms. And oh my God, there's like, I don't know, at least 144,000 angels that are at any point in time in the vicinity of this planet that are available to talk to you at any point in time if you would only listen, right? And all of these synchronicities and all of the guidance doesn't come out of nowhere. In fact, we're living in the soup of consciousness and everything is consciousness. So loneliness is the biggest fallacy. But the thing is, for as long as you're jailed in your lower centers, that is not your reality. And so I think that this journey that we're all collectively on is transcending the lower vibration so we can go back through the heart space into understanding that we've never been alone. And loneliness is like the biggest illusion. It's the biggest, I don't know, it's fake. It was never real. Yeah.
Yes, the magic, right? The magic that is all around us at any given moment. And it's when we tap back more into our soul and our essence, it's we get to see more of the magic, right? Because we're operating from soul level. We're not operating from the denser realities, right? And that's that veil that so many of we agree to when we incarnate again. It's like, okay, I'll put the veil up, and then one point in my life is when I'll awaken and remember, right? We talked about that in the beginning, remembering coming home, and and right, the loneliness, the mistrust in ourselves, right, the lack of love for ourselves. And I love what you said before, because it's like, yeah, we get to put on our oxygen masks first, and trust ourselves and love ourselves, and then share that with the world. And it's a journey, right? It's a journey. And I've been on this journey for a few years, all my life, but a few years very consciously. And I'm still enamored by the magic, right? I'm still enamored by all the angels around. And I think that's just that inner child. Can you talk about that too? About, right, that loneliness and then the lack of just joy in our society, right? It's like we get older, we mature, and then it's just like this robotic way of being that, yeah, our inner child's like, hey, I'm here, remember. Remember the joy and the love. I maybe that's also heart chakra, and also being a broken record. I don't think we can be broken records in this lifetime, because someone is listening to this for the first time, and it's resonating with them. I can already feel the people that are going to be listening to this episode. So yeah.
Yeah, so all of us have an inner child archetype. It is one of the ones that we come here no matter what. Now, the inner child is different from every human, for every human. You can have a wounded child, you can have the naive child, you can have the happy-go-lucky child. So I think meeting your inner child is actually, yet again, the path to self-discovery. One of my major motives in life is self-discovery, because there's truly so much to discover even when we go within, through all the lives that we lived, and all the karmic knots that we have accumulated, and all the soul contracts and the big whys behind everything. And I think that we are the universe within, right? So learning and understanding and meeting your divine child within can be a life altering experience, because you are right. I think that we are born into the society of suppression. We are conditioned to suppress a lot of things that are natural and authentic to us, because we're brought up into a system or into a blueprint of how things are quote unquote supposed to be. And that is why a lot of people end up living very fake lives. And what I mean by that is, when you're trying to live into a blueprint of somebody else's expectations, or the expectations of collective consciousness, it's very hard for you to get outside of the rat race and pursue things that are true and meaningful to you. And by the way, when you're in the rat race in contemporary society, and we're not going to go into food and what and the lifestyles and everything, you don't have, by the time you get home from work, there's not enough energy for you even to step outside of the rat race to even reminisce and think about what's wrong with this picture, right? And I've definitely noticed that the more I started learning the archetypes within, by the way, there are 7 major archetypes within each human that we all incarnated in. And then there are about another 7 that are secondary. And essentially, these are the cards that you've been dealt at birth, and you're going to be playing them no matter what. And one of the 7 is the type of child that you are. And so meeting that child as a part of yourself, and having a conversation with them and understanding what makes them happy, could be a very, very pivotal practice to do. And what I would recommend here is literally taking up a journal and writing down, what does my inner child love? And making a list of all the things, like whatever comes through, just like let your hand write. It's like a free write exercise. Don't make yourself wrong for what comes out of your subconscious. And then on the next page, you want to write down, what are the things that my inner child hates? And you also want to make a list, right? And make it a very conscious exercise to give a little bit more of the things to that child that he or she enjoys, and a little bit less of the other things, right? So the inner child is very strong, and you're right. Like, the joy of society has been taken away, because we have to be serious, by the way, and responsible, and all of the other things. Like, we have to make a living. God forbid, we're like free floating agents that pretend they have, free will and freedom everywhere. Oh my God. So, it's, again, part of it is claiming your power. I find that joy can actually live in three different chakras. Your lowest dimensional joy starts at the sacral, and that is the joy that you get from pleasure. That is the joy that you would get from travel. This is the joy that you would get from being an artist. This is the joy you would get from dancing. This is the joy that would get from any of your 5 senses. That joy is very fleeting. It is a beautiful thing, and not enough people, by the way, even experience that type of joy. The problem with that type of joy, again, is it doesn't fill you up. It's one of those things that you kind of have to keep doing whatever is that thing that makes you happy, like, because it's almost like a quick fix, and then you're back at it. Then there is the joy of the solar plexus, and that joy is purely connected with the sun. I'm a big, a big lover of the sun, as you well know. So for me, the joy that we get from having a relationship with the sun, being in the sun, exposing our solar plexus to the sun, being charged by the sun, and kind of like basking in its energy and glory, that is a very specific kind of joy that nothing else can give you. And again, I don't see enough people even realizing that this is like a special flavor. This one, by the way, can fill you up for up to 7 days. If you spend quality time in the sun that is intentional, it could last you up to 7 days. No joy in the sacral lasts this long, let me tell you. The joy of the sacral maybe lasts you for 1.5 to 2 hours, and good luck if that is the case. And then, of course, the higher aspect of joy lives in the heart space, which, of course, I love the heart. And this is the joy of connectedness. This is the joy of togetherness. This is, this is where your joy of family, this is your joy of sisterhood, this is your joy of brotherhood, this is your joy of motherhood, fatherhood, daughterhood, sonhood, all of those, right? The connection. And then, of course, the connection with Mother Nature and Gaia, and potentially even a heart space connection with other planets, whatever, however high you want to go. If that's, if Sirius or Pleiades is your joy, flavor of joy, you could still get that heart to heart connection. And essentially it would be connecting with your heart crystal to the heart crystal of that planet or planetary system. And that type of joy, again, can really fill you up for like months to come, right? So again, like as we're going up that ladder, as we're going up the chakras, the flavors of joy, the aspects of joy, how we perceive them in our body really changes as well. But I think human beings it shouldn't be either or, it should be all of it. I think we should build a society of you can have it all, instead of like, let me pick one thing and sacrifice everything else. Yes to joy, in other words, all of it, all flavors.
Yes to joy. Joy is actually my word of the year. So
Oh,
I've
wow.
been playing around with a lot of joy, and I love that, the flavors of joy. And right, there's no coincidence that as a collective, as a society, there's um, spikes of depression, right, of anxiety, of vitamin D levels that are so low that, I mean, just think of summertime or when you go on vacation, everyone just comes back and they're just glowing, and they're basking in that joy of what you said of, yeah, for days and days, because it's a recharge, right? It's like plugging we're our phones, we're the iPhones, and we're plugging ourselves back into the main central solar energy. It's so powerful. And yeah, community of connection. And I feel that, right, a lot of things are coming to the surface. It's these things are all coming to the surface so that we can see them, right? So that we can feel them, and then eventually alchemize them, transmute them, and come back to that community, come back to that connection. And when you feel that, right, soul family or going on a retreat, it's almost like it breaks open your heart so much that you're grieving these parts that have always been within you, right? This community that your soul knows so deeply. It's visceral, it's a visceral level. And then you're thrown back into society, right? Or your job. And I know so many people that are like, I need a vacation from my vacation, or I need a break from a retreat, and then going back and was assimilating back into my quote unquote life or real world. So I love that, the flavors of joy. It feels so juicy. I love that so much.
Yeah, and I was actually, as you were talking, what I was present to was your, I mean, I love your heart space and the energy of your heart quite a lot. It's very palpable for me, although I'm very physically very removed from you. But what's distance, right? What's time space anyway? But the reason that for the older souls, community feels like such an important aspect of life is because essentially older souls come in with a lot more memories of how it feels either in higher dimensional worlds where community is the name of the game, where separation is not real and it's not practiced or it's not exercised. And so it's we have this feeling of missing it, of like the missing of the tribe, whereas like some other souls might not have it, so for them they're discovering that in you, right? But we hold that frequency and we hold that memory and we yearn for it, and so we yearn to create it for others, because it's very much a memory, and it's very much normal for us. Whereas actually this time space reality and this matrix, everybody's actually in a solitary confinement room, so to say. Every human has their own own cell of the matrix, one person, right? And so by definition, it is the absence of community. And so building community actually needs to be a conscious act. And that's why I speak about consciously building those bridges, right? Not subconsciously or accidentally building a bridge just because you forgot to protect yourself from somebody inflicting harm on you. And there are two other things that I wanted to say. So to your earlier point about anxiety and depression, I read the stat somewhere that since 2020, anxiety and depression have gone up by 300% in the world, which is really ridiculous. And just a couple of words to say. So on anxiety, one thing, anxiety is the overabundance of the energy of fire in your body. And that is the only thing that it is, right? And it is, it is the fire that just it's like a raging fire in the forest that like it just spreads, and it's really hard to stop it. The only remedy for anxiety is water. The water element is really what's missing, and that is the aspect of surrender in the divine feminine. So I say, if you're experiencing anxiety, go within and find the inner female. Actually, for those people, really meeting the divine mother, really working with the divine feminine energies, maybe the energies of the rose, the energies of the higher heart is what they really need to do. Otherwise, anxiety can eat you alive, because fire energies on this planet can be pretty strong, and they can also be pretty harmful if you let them just, ride it out. And then depression is actually a little bit different. So depression, and actually both depression and anxiety sometimes are byproducts of not following your path to some degree. And specifically with depression, and depression is one of those where, because most humans are not connected to their higher aspects, yet they are submerged into the collective consciousness soup, which dictates them what they're supposed to do and dictates them what the expectations are, to a point where some parents decide the occupation of their child in certain societies. They're like, well, you're either a lawyer or a doctor, and these are the only two things that are legitimate occupations, and I won't have it any other way. And then the child goes and becomes a lawyer or a doctor and is miserable forever, right? And that is the predicament of other people making decisions for you. So depression is actually you being off your path, and your higher self is so frustrated that you've been off your path for so long that at this point, it doesn't even believe that you're going to get on the track. So at this point, your higher self is checked out. And what you're experiencing is the removal of energy of your higher self, because he or she's checked out, and you're left with 1% of 100%. And you can get out of bed. Well, of course you can get out of bed, because your higher self is not banking on you to make the right calls anymore. So it's like, well, whatever. I'm going to go and busy myself with some of these other avatars and some of these other lives that I'm living, and I'm going to leave this one alone. And that is essentially depression. So the cure, ironically, for both depression and anxiety is going and connecting with your higher aspect, and going and finding out what your purpose is, and going and finding out what your mission is, and then getting on that mission, But actually, just through the process of finding out, your higher self is going to get the call that you are at least starting to make changes, and it's going to bring back the energy that it just took away from you. All of a sudden, you're going to have the energy to wake up in the morning and feel excited about it and making moves, right? But it starts with you making a commitment to finally figuring out what your purpose is. So I just had to say this about anxiety and depression.
Wow, I feel like those downloads, those knowings that you have are going to be really profound and also confronting for some beautiful souls listening, because we as humans become so attached to labels, right? We become so attached to what someone has diagnosed us as, right? Or this runs in my family, so I have a predisposition to it. And a lot of times too, people are like, well, that's spiritual bypassing, but it's not. We are here to live a purpose. We are here to live our dharmic mission. And no wonder I can just see there's so many higher selves on this planet that are just like, come on, like shaking their human avatars, like, let's go.
Yes,
Do.
exactly.
So yeah, I think I think people listening, some souls are going to feel confronted, right? Because that's also a permeating energy in our collective too, of truths that aren't truths, but we have identified as truths because someone has told us it, or because we've been taught it all of our lives. And it makes so much sense, especially I battled, I don't want to say battled, but I I felt anxiety and depression all of my 20s, right? And no wonder, of course, because I was young and not listening to my higher self, and not doing the things that maybe I could have quote unquote been doing at a younger age. Because yeah, my soul knew when I was born. We got work to do here in this lifetime. So yeah, it's um it's exciting when you do. Maybe this is a good question. How can people connect with their higher self? How can people, because I have clients too, they're like, Michelle, I don't know my purpose. How can I find my purpose? Like it's a penny, right? Like, how can I find this thing? So what are some ways you can recommend or share about, yeah, connecting with that higher self, or connecting with your purpose, connecting with your dharma?
Totally. Before I answer that, I just wanted to make a comment, maybe to your point about certain, people, souls feeling confronted. I don't want to underestimate how strong certain things that run in the lineage are. You're right, depression, anxiety, and by the way, a lot of other things run in lineages. And of course, you're only attracted to a particular lineage because you have the same lesson. Otherwise, you would not be a genetic or energetic vibration to that lineage. So actually, when something does run in your family, yes, it is actually harder, arguably speaking, harder for you to fix that, because it's almost like there's a vortex that's moving a certain, at a certain velocity, and you're part of the vortex. And then you're like, well, fine, I'm just a part of the vortex, and let me just move in the same direction. However, there's strong trauma in the lineage. Chances are you came here to transcend it and not just to experience it. Because no soul is committed to just suffering. Let me tell you, souls want to evolve. Sometimes evolutions happen through suffering, but suffering for the sake of suffering is not the path of any soul that I'm aware of, right? And when you do the healing, and I've certainly had to transform a lot of things in my lineage. I did so much work on my ancestry, especially on my mom's side. We had some pretty crazy things to deal with. And so first I had to change it within me. And then I also had an additional purging and additional healing to do for the entirety of my lineage, right? But I'm telling you, the work starts with you, right? You're that first domino effect. And just because it runs in your lineage doesn't mean that you're powerless. In fact, your soul, your higher self, believed that you can transcend that karma. And that's why it sent you exactly into this lineage, so you could experience how it feels to be in the karmic energies, how uncomfortable that is, how maybe not you or not pleasant that is, so you could be the beginning of the change. But to your question about connecting with a higher self, your higher self wants to connect with you. It is its greatest wish. Now, your higher self is also a very high vibrational being compared to this lower projection of yours. So the unfortunate truth is, step one of connecting to your higher self is purifying your vessel. And that is, by the vessel, I mean your body, your temple, however you want to call it, right? So it is things like, starting slow, one step at a time, going easy on the meat and chicken and fish and all of the things, right? Because that is, in and of itself, food that is vegan is raising your vibrations. Giving up things like alcohol, or cigarettes, like they really bring your vibrations down, right? So kind of like removing all the things that are in the way of your vibrations being as high as they can possibly be. In fact, when my clairaudience opened up, I was able, I started hearing certain words, but I couldn't hear my higher self until I gave up wine. So I had to completely cut out alcohol. And then I was able to meet my higher self at the level that she was. But my vessel wasn't pure enough, right? And then there are, a lot of different cleanses that I had to do as well. Like you name it, I've done it. And then also watch your consumption. And when I say consumption, it's not just food, right? It's everything else that you consume. What kind of music do you listen to? Is it like, I don't know, the rap lyrics about murder? Because that is not a high vibration. I hate to say this, right? Your higher self does not vibrate at those frequencies. Same thing, like, what are you watching on TV? Is it the news? That's a bunch of negativity. So chances are it's lowering your vibrations, right? So make sure you're consuming high vibrational content. Look at the people that your best friends, essentially, or like the people that you spend the most time with, because whatever their vibrations are going to be your vibrations. If you give up drinking, but 5 of your best friends are, getting wasted every night, it ain't going to work very well for you, because every time the high vibrational being comes in contact with a low vibrational being, this exchange is not in the favor of the high vibrational being. Their vibrations drop like pretty quickly. It's actually a lot harder to raise vibrations instead of lower, even for beings that are, been there, done that in our older souls. So all of these things kind of need to happen in your life, right? There are a lot of other things that are, lowering your vibrations, like negative emotions and negative mental states, right? So you're going to have to do some work there as well. Any type of self-hate, guilt, jealousy, all of these hate, all of these vibrations are going to bring you down, right? All of these feelings. So it's cleansing your emotional body as well. And then when all is said and done, and by the way, it doesn't have to be like, it's not like you for 3 years, you're like vegan and only then your higher self is going to want to reach back out to you. No, it can actually happen very quickly. But once you're raising your vibrations, your higher self is at least going to be able to kind of stretch out its hands to reach you, right? And so in a meditative state, essentially, you would imagine your higher self as a light body. And you would imagine that there is a cord, an energetic cord that stretches from, the core, the heart space of your higher self and your heart space. And you want to imagine that cord being activated and energy starting to course through the cord back and forth. So like every energy cord, it's a two-way street. So you give and you take, right? And so you strengthen that cord, you increase its velocity, you increase its diameter, and over time you will be able to get support from your higher self. Now, it may come in very different forms, but you will receive the signs. So purifying the vessel and then actually activating the connection is the magic formula.
Amazing. And thank you for sharing too about the lineages of breaking those patterns and healing those patterns, right? Of at least 8 generations back, 8 generations forward. And yeah, the testament of strength to the soul that said, hey, actually, I think I can do that this lifetime. I think I can do it. So I love I love the idea of that, of that we chose these lives, that we chose these families, right? I mean, there's so much around that too, of like victim mindset, right? Like, well, this is my life, and then this is just who I'm around, and empowering yourself to be like, no, I get to co-create my life. I get to take back my power. I get to reclaim who I am, because I know for myself personally, I'm a very different person than I was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And it is that homecoming, right? Because it's like, well, I was playing a fake, not fake avatar, but kind of, right? Like what I thought I was supposed to be, what you thought you were supposed to be, and everyone listening. And it's it's powerful, and that's the ripple effect, right? That's what you said before about, it starts with us, and we cannot change anyone else, right? I know I that comes up a lot with clients where they're just like, well, my partner's not changing, or my friends aren't changing, or my family's not changing. And we can only help ourselves, really, at the end of the day. So yeah, I'm just loving this flow of knowledge. And yeah, if you want to talk more about your podcast, and even how you received the download to start your podcast, it's one of the few I listen to. I'm not a huge, even though I have one, I'm not a huge podcast listener, but yours is definitely one of my favorites. So if you want to just share about, yeah, your podcast.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. Well, I was in the closet the first, what, 2.5, almost 3 years post awakening, because I'm an entrepreneur. I run a startup. I'm supposed to be this businesswoman, if you know what I mean. I'm not supposed to be talking to like my guides and angels and dragons in my spare time. That's not supposed to be happening, but it is happening, right? And so I was in the spiritual closet for forever. And now my partner, my husband, we're on this journey together, on the awakening journey together. We literally had pretty crazy awakening stories on the same day. We were in different countries, and he had his and I had mine. And like, that is just some crazy synchronicity. But anyhow, he is my like, he's my rock. He, as far as like my spiritual journey, I think he believes in more 10 times in me, 10 times more than I believe in myself. And so, you know, essentially what how this started is, we learned hypnosis. We took a course on hypnosis, and he started putting me, you're supposed to practice. And so we had to practice on each other. So he put me under hypnosis, and he started asking me questions. And of course, under hypnosis, I was in the state of my higher self. I was connected fully to my higher self. And what he's learned very quickly is that you can ask my higher self anything, and she will give you the most insightful answers in the plainest of languages. And it like, we went high, we went low, we went in between, and she just had the answers for everything. And so for the first 6 months, he would just put me under hypnosis and would just like ask questions about him, his life, and everything else. And I was like, at one point, I was like, Sergey, like, I really appreciate that you are putting me out of commission for 2 hours and then having healing sessions using my higher self. But I'm like, I feel like maybe we can talk about things that are not you, and like maybe things that are, like some other topics. And so he started asking me about the universe and, divine feminine. And he was actually very much into the topic of sacred flames. And so he was really curious about that. And at one point he bought the mic, and we had, I was resisting being recorded because I was in the closet. I'm like, oh my God, imagine somebody hears this, they're gonna burn me at the stake, or something else. Maybe they'll drown me. I don't know. all that persecution wind coming right back. And I was resisting it, but we have a collective mission, him and I. And of the two of us, I'm meant to be the voice. Like, I'm meant to be the one who speaks. And we had this really, really hard conversation around me trying to avoid that responsibility. And he goes like, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to have to do it. He's like, but I'm going to suck at it, and I'm going to have to do it. And this is what you're doing to me. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And so essentially I decided to take on recording the podcast. And so it was really him putting me under hypnosis and asking me questions that he wanted to ask. And, the rest was history. And then we did maybe 90 episodes that way. And we talked about everything under the sun, from, I don't know, hair and the importance of hair, to the sacred flames, to hermetic principles and karma. And then I realized that I was actually supposed to be a monologue. One day I was just sitting and I was like, oh, I'm supposed to do self-hypnosis and just talk about what comes through. And so we shifted how the podcast is being done, and now I also connect to the energies of the human collective. And so that's actually pretty interesting to me, because when I get into hypnosis to do a podcast episode, I essentially imagine that I'm sitting on stage and there's all these people in front of me, and they all have questions. And so as I'm delivering, whatever the topic is for that episode, which is 100% divinely guided, sometimes I don't even know what the topic is before I get into the hypnosis state. And then I'm like, oh, that's the topic. It makes sense. And then it's an interaction with, the human collective. And so, I am at any point in time, I know what they're thinking, what they're feeling. As I'm describing like a very esoteric concept, I get the questions back, and so I can react in real time. So that's the podcast. It's a labor of love, and very much not because Mariya wanted to do it, but because I felt bad that my partner would have had to do it if I didn't step up. And I know that that's not his destiny. And, but the podcast is just the beginning. I'm being called to expand and unfold as we go along. I'm supposed to be on video. They're telling me, my guides. I'm like, okay, video it is. So I guess that's the next frontier. And I also wrote a book. So I guess I'm an author now. And the funny part about my guides, they're like, well, one down, 37 more to go. I'm like, sorry, what? They're like, yeah, another 37 books. And literally I've seen visions of the future where the last book that I write, I hand off the day before I die. Literally, I finished my last book, and then next morning I'm out of here. And so essentially, I guess I'm going to have to be the author for the rest of my life, among other things. So that's me, I guess, in a nutshell. I guess I can't stay in the closet now, can I, with 37 books?
Wow. Oh. Well, everyone listening gets to listen to Conversations with My Higher Self podcast, because some of those episodes have changed my life. They're so powerful and potent. And talk about remembering that we are a channel, right? Talk about remembering that we are here, these vessels are here to share the divine, to share our purpose, to share our mission, to share Christ consciousness, right? To share this source light. And that when we don't do it, right, that's a disservice to humanity. And I feel you on the spirit guides who have such faith in us and are our biggest cheerleaders, and are like, oh, great. Yeah, you are starting women's circles. Okay, now this. Okay, now this. And you're like, guys, I'm human. Remember my nervous system. Remember, what you're saying about being on camera, about being quote unquote found out, coming out of the spiritual closet. I really don't believe that anyone coming out of the spiritual closet, I don't want to say has a hard or easy route, but it's confronting, right? Because it's healing the persecution wounds that you talked about. It's healing all of these stories of ego, right? Oh, I'm doing this from ego. But the funny thing is that the downloads, the inspirations that come to our awareness are not from ego, because we're not even thinking of them, right? Like you said, you wake up at 2 a.m. and I feel you waking up at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., grabbing a journal and just, okay, I don't know what this is, but I'm writing it down. That is so far from ego. That is books, podcasts, posts, words, any of that. It's meant to be imprinted in the collective. Yeah.
Yes. No, it totally makes sense what you're saying. Well, if it's your calling, it's going to keep on calling. And that is, I think for the ones of us that are meant to do planetary work, that are meant to share, and that are clear channels, you cannot put that in the closet or in a black box and forget it exists, because it's going to keep on knocking on your door, to your point, waking you up at 2 a.m. or at an ungodly amount of, at an ungodly hour, and it will just be like, boom, it's arrived. Like my first book just arrived. I did not plan for it. They're like, do you want to know what you're going to be doing next? I'm like, sure. They're like, this is the book, this is the name, and it's going to have 72 chapters, and these are the names, please write them down. And I'm like, okay. So I mean, I would love for it to have been ego, to be honest, but it was anything but. It was them just taking me for, taking me as a resource and telling me, giving me a commission and saying, this is exactly what we need you to do. And they kind of like, you should just do it, right? I actually have experienced too many commissions. One thing I will tell you is, yes, we do have our higher selves, but we have other beings upstairs. I call the spirit realm upstairs. Upstairs that are interested in how this incarnation of ours is going to go, and some of them have expectations, if you know what I mean. I call them sponsoring entities. It's kind of like investors in the business. They're like, give you like a little coin and expect for you to like dance for them or like jump around for them. And so I have a lot of these that have like beings that have expectations for me. This one spirit guide of mine wants me to do conscious communities. This other spirit guide of mine wants me to launch a conscious water business. Then of course there are 37 books, and let's not forget about the podcast. And then they want me to be on TV and all of these other things. And I'm like, wait a second. To your point, I also have a daytime job. So like I'm also out of commission for 40 hours a week, right? So like you want me to do everything on top of like what I'm already doing? I mean, thank you. So I was experiencing massive overwhelm not so long ago because they gave me 5 commissions all at the same time. And I was like, whoa. And one thing I realized is that our guides watch for our potential and not our resource. So they look at us, they look at, you, me, and other beautiful beings, and they're like, this being has what it takes. So we're just going to send them the little parcel of what they're meant to do. And, then they'll figure it out. And it's kind of up to us here downstairs to figure out what our resources and prioritize, right? It's almost like, thank you, I received this, this intention of yours or this commission from you. And I, either commit to it or I don't, right? We all have free will. And then this is my timeline. And I've definitely learned to prioritize things and, establish boundaries, even if the boundaries are not with physical beings, but with my own guides that I have always thought know better. And yes, they do know better, but the one thing they don't know is your physical limitations here in 3D. That is the number one thing you are the expert on, right? So I think like putting boundaries, and also, I think that, you see, I'm not worried about creating from ego, because if it was up to my ego, I would have never come out of the closet, because my ego just wanted to be an entrepreneur and safe and maybe rich one day, and have a big company, run a big company. And I actually never wanted to be in the spotlight, because the spotlight starts bringing out my persecution wound and death and whatnot. I was like, I detested the spotlight. It's really hard to get me to be in the spotlight, even on the podcast, let alone on video. So I'm not worried about ego, but I am very cognizant of the fact that we came here for a reason, right? And if God, source, or whoever gave you a clear channel and gives you all of these downloads, it's not because you're meant to keep and hold on to them. It is because you're meant to share. That is your destiny. That is your purpose. And the more you share, the more you give, the more you're going to receive in terms of downloads. So you're going to have to keep giving even more. But you're also going to start receiving, all the love from people and the gratitude and everything else. And one thing that's most gratifying for me is when people tell me that I've helped them, or I've changed their lives, or if they were going through like a very dark spot or dark place, and my podcast really was that light for them. And so that is what matters to me. That is what I love. And also, ego is separation. So of course we come here. I also don't perceive ego to be terribly bad. I'll explain why, right? When Source created us as individual sparks of consciousness, it created us to be unique, right? Each of us is a unique rendition of Source. As such, we have a unique set of skills and talents and a unique set of vibrations. And, and yes, when we come to this 3D world, it starts becoming labeled as ego, but it's really individuality, right? And my individuality can be a curse, but it's also a blessing, right? Because thanks to the things that I've practiced in my past lives, I have certain things that I can share today, right? And so actually, I'm less worried about ego, more worried about being on the path, and really listening when my spirit guides are talking to me, and really understanding, what is it that they believe is in the greatest good of humanity for me to create right now. And then, yeah, once the calling comes, it's incredibly hard to not, if not impossible, to resist it. For me, it's impossible. Like, it just comes, and like I know I must do it. And by the way, like, because like writing a book is a long-term project, right? Like, I wrote every Sunday for 6 hours. And it's Sunday, like no matter what, like if I'm tired, if I'm like out of my resource, I feel like a pull, like somebody's pulling me. And like, my husband would be talking to me at brunch or something, and I can't even focus because the pull is so strong. I'm like, oh my God, if I don't go to write this book right now, I think I'm going to explode. And literally until I got done with the book, like the pull didn't go away. It was like that. I'm like, that is not ego. I don't know what this is. This is some extraterrestrial magic. It's real, and I can't live unless I complete it, if you know what I mean. So that's what like a calling feels like.
Oh my gosh, so beautiful. Can you talk about your first book?
Yeah, if you want to. So my spirit guides asked me how many people I wanted to help, and I said as many people as possible. And they said, then you're going to write a book about manifestation. I was like, okay. I did not think that manifestation was something I was going to write a book about. Despite the fact that I really love the concept, and I personally practice manifestation all the time. Now, the book was downloaded from spirit. In other words, it's not my experience of manifesting at all, because as I was writing the book, some of the chapters, I don't know, chapter 11, the stacking principle. They're telling me chapter 11 is called the stacking principle. I'm like, what is the stacking principle? And then I sit down to write, and then I learn what the stacking principle is through the process of writing. And so it's not like Mariya's perspective of manifestation. The book is called 72 Keys to Manifestation, an ancient path of a modern day alchemist. So it's energy alchemy. It's all about how to take your energy and external sources of energy that you have access to and turn them into things, physical things in your life that you really want. And essentially, it's 72 ancient keys. The book is divided into 3 sections. The first section is the energy. So really looking at your own, diagnosing where you are, understanding what kinds of energy from the energy spectrum you need to manifest. It's actually a spectrum from yellow to gold. And then I explain where it lives in your body, how to get more of it, what are the different sources, et cetera, what's in the way for you from the energy perspective. And that's like 55 keys right there. The next section is all about the mental body and belief systems. Because no matter how much energy you have, and even if you know how to wield it, unless you're able to remove the obstacles that tend to be in the mental arena and the belief systems that literally are in the way of your abundance, you're not going to go very far. So the second section is all about fixing the limiting beliefs, finding them, understanding how to work with the energy of logos, which is the energy of your word. I know you did an episode on words as spells. I really love that. So there's a little bit of that word magic in there as well, because essentially mental constructs, words, and language, that's part of the same universe. And the third section of the book is manifesting on planetary level. It's a very short section. I think there's 7 keys, if I'm not mistaken, but that is ancient hidden knowledge. So that is where we talk about Axis Mundi. That is where we talk about the Merkaba, how to work with those energies. It's like hardcore, but also it really works. Like the practices in this book really work. Now, every chapter, every key has a theoretical, like a little bit of the theory, and really focuses on the practice. So every key has a practical exercise on how to, ground that energy, practice that energy in your life. And that is the book. And like I said, like the book surprised me. I was a scribe. I can't even consider myself an author, because an author understands and is able to intellectualize what they're writing, but the scribe just writes down whatever comes from spirit and then tries to understand it later, to a point where I wrote the book Michelle, I couldn't tell you until I edited and reread it 3 times what I wrote. I did not remember what the book was about. I know it's about manifestation. I know it has 72 chapters. Like, I don't know what's in it. And yeah, so that's the book. It's the first of many, apparently. But it is actually a fun way to get to know reality, because you really get to dive deep into a topic. And the funny part is, the more I started diving deep into manifestation, I could probably write like 5 more books just on manifestation alone. It's like that deep. Now, the reason manifestation is so interesting is because what separates humans from source, from one perspective, is our ability to create. In other words, source can manifest instantly, whereas human beings in third dimensional planets have to try so hard to materialize even the simplest of things, right? Because we're in time-space reality, things always take forever. One of the ways, right, of, I don't want to say ascension, but evolution, right, for human beings. And ascension is essentially wherever you are, trying to get as close to source as you can be, right? One of the proxies of getting there is learning manifestation, because manifestation is the same as creation, and source is the greatest creator that is, right? So once you untap that potential within, you essentially become source, or you essentially become god, goddess, right? Which is the next lap of evolution of, humans on planet Earth, is discovering the god, goddess within, discovering that power, discovering that potential within. And that's why I actually really love manifestation, because I do think it's like a little bit of art, a little bit of science, and a really, really big touch of magic. And I'm just really excited for people to read it.
I cannot wait to read it. Oh my gosh, I can just imagine you just like, okay, what's next? Okay. All right, I got my pen. What's next? It's magical. Yeah, I'm really excited to read. And yeah, I think that that's how we can help people, right? Reminding others how powerful they are, because we are taught that separation, right? That the illusion of separation, that we're not powerful, that we're dependent on external factors, that we're dependent on things outside of us. So I love that so much. When is it coming out?
November 11th, 11/11.
11/11.
Yeah.
Amazing. And we can just keep talking and talking and talking. I feel like you'll be on the podcast again. And thank you so much for sharing your essence, for sharing your wisdom, for saying yes to this podcast. And I can feel so many beautiful souls being drawn to this episode, and it makes my heart so happy. But yeah, thank you for being. Where can people find you? How can people work with you, if that's even a case? Just, yeah, your plug is here.
Yeah, I am on Instagram at This Is Mariya Official. Mariya is a weird spelling, Mariya. And then I also have a website, thisismariya.com. I think these are, and then of course my podcast is Conversations with Your Higher Self. And then the book is on Amazon. So I'm sure if you Google 72 Keys to Manifestation, you'll be able to find it. And Michelle, thank you so much for holding the space so well, and for your beautiful heart chakra that I felt was just working extra hard, to create again this sisterhood bond. And just really grateful for you. And it's been an honor being on your podcast.
Thank you, my love. Thank you, thank you, thank you.